The models involve what I would call constructing or building up our understanding of the Constitution's unwritten message. One of them I call the geometric model, which is constructed by linking the points and lines that the Constitution's language lays out, treating some of what the Constitution says as distinct points and then trying to extrapolate by looking at what is sort of between the lines. Second is what I call the geodesic model. Think about Buckminster Fuller's geodesic dome with all of these planes and surfaces that kind of provide a protective surrounding for the rights that are made explicit. So, for example, among the rights is the right not to have the government, without sufficient cause, break into your home and search your private papers and possessions. To make that right meaningful, you need either to be able to sue the officers who violate it or exclude the evidence they obtain. But those things are not written down. They are part of the geodesic model. And what I call the global model, the third of these constructive models, one reaches across national boundaries to look at what other countries with constitutions something like ours have learned in their history. It's not that we're bound by what France or South Africa or Australia does in their constitution, but we can learn from it. Turns out there are a lot of justices who think that's a terrible thing to do. We should not look across the ocean. And of course, if we don't look at other countries, they're not too likely to look at us, and we're likely to develop an isolationist mentality in constitutional law, but I think that's just a temporary phase. The other three models involve what I call deconstructing or taking apart the Constitution, looking at what lies beneath it, or what has to be presupposed in order to make sense of it. There's what I call the geological model, which, as the name suggests, involves digging beneath what the provisions of the Constitution say to figure out what do you have to assume in order to make sense of it. Let me give you just one example. The Fourth Amendment says that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects from unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. It sounds like it's just a protection against having the cops break in and seize your stuff at home. But some justices have said, what sense would it make to protect you from unreasonable search and seizure if the government could dictate every detail of what you do at home? They could micromanage your personal life, so that if someone tattles and says, she stayed up all night, not good for you, there would be probable cause to invade your home. There's got to be some sphere of autonomy around the individual to make sense of the Fourth Amendment. That's the geological method. Then there's another that I call the gravitational model, which is a little harder to explain, but think about black holes, the way space is warped and bent. And if you get too close to what is called the event horizon of a black hole, see you later. There you go, never to be seen again. Well, we have to define some lines such that the government can't cross them, because once it has crossed them, there's no limit. That's why we have some principles about the national government not treating the states as mere puppets, because once it does, we've essentially collapsed the whole thing into a central national government and given up the virtues of federalism. That's why we need a line that says there are some personal details of your life that the government can't control. Because if it could tell you how many children to have, the way they have sometimes in China, then what couldn't it tell you? What is there about your life that the government couldn't dictate? That's the gravitational model. And finally, there is what I call the gyroscopic model. Think of the whole system spinning like a top, like a cradle. And what keeps it stable, what prevents it from flying apart, are certain principles about not having the states run off and govern the whole country, because that would cause lots of tension among the states and the center will not hold. What prevents it all from collapsing to the center? Well, there are some principles about state autonomy to do that. And obviously, there's more to these 6 models than I've described in this brief compass, because I do want to save time for questions and answers, and I want to give you an incentive to buy the book. If you don't get one here, it's available on Amazon.com. Lots of nice comments from Doris Kearns Goodwin and other cool folks about it. So I don't want to elaborate the models here. I want to urge you to read the book. I want instead to close on a broader note. Most of the story of our Constitution is a story of struggle to extend the writ of what it never quite says. The real framers of the Constitution were not only the property owner white guys in wigs, the people who met in that long, hot summer in Philadelphia. There were many more people, women and men, poor and rich, black, white, brown, red, and yellow, people who marched and bled, who sang and rode buses and sat in and sometimes died to make freedom ring. Their song didn't take all of its lyrics from the Constitution's literal text. That's in a way the message of my book. The Constitution furnishes the score, we the people, its lyrics. You know, this has been a season of political ugliness, recrimination verging on paralysis and pessimism. The negative ads are legion on both sides, I think. But I think if we're true to the invisible Constitution, that doesn't have to be our fate. The Audacity of Hope is not only the name of an interesting book by a candidate for president, but it's what I would challenge all of us to have when we think about the Constitution. Lincoln famously ended his first inaugural with words that I also want to use to close the prepared part of these remarks. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nation. Thank you very much. There are two microphones, so I think it would be best if people could ask questions, say who you are if you want.